There we go. Okay, so this week's Torah portion, and I do want to apologize for missing last week. Life cycle events sometimes get in the way, and I had to conduct a funeral last week. And before I get to study, I just want to comment about that funeral. So it was at King David Cemetery in Falls Church, Virginia. They have the same rule of social gathering as Maryland does, can't have more than 10 people. So this is the funeral for Yetta Buckberg, who was a longtime member of our congregation. So she has 4 sons, one of whom is Perry, who's a member of our shul. 4 sons and their spouses makes 8. She had a brother and a sister-in-law. They were there. They came down from Pennsylvania. That's 10. Me, I'm 11. There were also grandchildren there. So the King David Cemetery officials did not prevent that amount of people from gathering around the grave. So I was pleased. We were socially distant around the grave, but we were able, all the family that were there, nobody had to stay by their car. Everybody was able to be there for the funeral. So I was glad for them, but then at the same time, Rita Rubenstein, was the one who called me to tell me about Rose Halpern's son passing away, but that's in New York, and in New York nobody can go to a funeral. So just adds to the tragedy of this time that when we need to be close, when we need to be able to feel comfort by being in other people's presence in order to help with the grieving and the mourning process, we can't do that. Which connects, by the way, to this week's portion, the portion Emor. So one of the aspects, one of the concepts discussed in the portion Emor, and Paul can tell us a lot more about it because it's the anniversary of his bar mitzvah. And so and it's also his son Ravid's the anniversary of his bar mitzvah. So between the two of them, they read the whole parsha for Ravid's bar mitzvah. But as they know, the portion Emor, we may be familiar with us. Those of us who come to shul. Oh, good. Thank you, Judy. Chapter and verse is in the Eitz Chaim or on page 717. In any other edition of the Chumash, it's Leviticus chapter 21. So if you're using a Chumash, just look in the table of contents for Emor. If you're using a Bible, look for Leviticus chapter 21. So the portion, we're familiar with it. Those of us who come to shul on a regular basis, especially on the holidays, are familiar with the latter part of the portion because it discusses the holidays that are observed throughout the year. And it has a description. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Arnie, for that link on Safaria. So you have to cut and paste what Arnie posted in the chat if you want to do it online, if you don't have a book in front of you. Cut and paste it into your web browser. So it describes for us the holidays from Shabbat, the sacred occasions throughout the year, not just holidays. So it describes Shabbat and then Passover, the Omer, Shavuot, what has come to be Rosh Hashanah, but is not described as Rosh Hashanah. It's the first day of the 7th month, and then Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. So that's what's described with the sacred occasions here, but it's preceded by, just one second as I let somebody else in. Just one second, I just want to, okay, muted, good. Okay, welcome Diane to our session today. So it's preceded by particular behaviors and practices that the Kohanim are supposed to subscribe to, that makes the Kohen, the priest, different than everybody else in the community. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things from the beginning of the portion. So we're on 7:17 in the Eitz Chaim, or whatever edition you're using, Leviticus chapter 21. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the son of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for any dead person among his kin," which is what I said was the reference to, I brought up the funeral that I officiated at last week. No Kohen can defile himself for any dead person among his kin, except for the relatives that are closest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother. A wife is missing from the list, and the commentary explains to us that the rabbis added wife to the list. So these, for anybody who you would say Kaddish for, the Kohen is allowed to so-called defile himself to take care, to attend the funeral, or to do any of the other necessary arrangements for the funeral. Also, for a virgin sister close to him, because she is not married, for her he may defile himself, but he shall not defile himself as a kinsman by marriage, and so profane himself. So that in our day and age, there are Kohanim who still symbolically follow these rules. And so when I say symbolically, the idea is that for the Torah and for the time of the rabbis when the temple was standing in Jerusalem, we discussed this a little bit 2 weeks ago with the portion Tazria Mitzorah about this whole issue of ritual purity and impurity, right? It has nothing to do with with germs, bacteria, virus. It has nothing to do about staying healthy and safe and washing hands to keep the virus away. It's not about that. Ritual purity is this random idea, and I'm saying random because it could be associated with anything. But God and the Torah teach us that there are certain elements that by nature are ritually impure, and one of those things is a dead body, a dead human body. So for the Torah, that is the ultimate form of ritual impurity. That though other fluids that flow from our body could make us ritually impure, the level of impurity that promotes is on a lower level than the ritual impurity that would happen if we came into contact with the dead. Because contact with the dead is just being in the same building as a dead person. The reason behind this, we really don't know what the reason is. Commentators could suggest, but it's just suggestion. The Torah says that contact with the dead makes us ritually impure. We can only surmise homiletically why that is. But for the rabbis, for the Torah and for the rabbis in the lengthy explanation and interpretation of these laws, just being in the same, under the same tent as a dead body that's contact enough to make you ritually impure. And then one would have to isolate oneself for 7 days, and one would have to undergo this bizarre ritual of purification, which is the red heifer. That is the portion Chukat, the beginning of the portion Chukat in the book of Numbers. So not only is contact with the dead a bizarre kind of ritual impurity, but the purification ceremony itself is a bizarre ceremony. So none of that can be done today. The purification cannot be done today because the temple isn't standing in Jerusalem. And so therefore, all the laws of ritual impurity are basically about just one second. I think that's Alec Wagenheim, who just joined us, and it's great to see Alec. Hope Carol is doing well too, Alec. It's good to see you. We just started talking about the portion Emor, which is in the Eitz Chaim, is on page 717, or whatever version of the Bible you're using, Leviticus chapter 21. So aside from a married woman's once a month ritual impurity, which is purified by going to the mikveh, all other forms of ritual impurity don't really exist anymore. I mean, they exist, but there's no way to become pure from it. So all of us, if we've ever been to a funeral, or if we've ever been in a hospital, we are all ritually impure. And I say hospital because invariably there is a body in the morgue of the hospital at all times. So because the body is in the morgue, I'll get to your question in a second, Gabe. Because the body is in the morgue, everybody in the building of the hospital becomes automatically ritually impure. So we're all ritually impure, but there's nothing we can do about it, so we continue on with our life. We symbolically purify ourselves sometimes. So the more traditional among us, when we have bread at a meal, we'll wash our hands, do netilat yadayim, pour water on our hands 3 times on each hand, and say the blessing al netilat yadayim, and then say hamotzi. The washing of the hands symbolically purifies ourselves as we are about to sit down and eat a meal, but it's symbolic. We symbolically purify ourselves after departing a cemetery, either by washing hands right there at the either funerals that I do here in the greater Washington area. The cemetery directors know that to have a pitcher of water available at the roadside, because the paved surfaces in the cemetery are places where you can walk without contracting ritual impurity. So you can wash hands there, or sometimes people at the Shiva house, coming right back from the cemetery to the house, will have a pitcher of water outside the front door. So that symbolically, ritually purifies ourselves. Now, a Kohen can be around a mate mitzvah without impurity. No, Kohen can only be around the dead for 2 reasons. One, it's his immediate family who has passed away, and so he is obligated to take care of his family. Or by mate mitzvah, maybe you're referring, Gabe, to a corpse that is found outside of city limits and goes unclaimed. So the book of Deuteronomy talks about that case, where then the 2 closest towns, the closest town to where that corpse is found, and it's a Jewish corpse, they have to come, the elders of the city have to come out, and a Kohen has to come out and lay claim to this body as their own. And the Kohen would offer a sacrifice right there on the spot of a young animal whose neck would then be broken as an offering to appease God for having allowed someone to escape their responsibility and suffer this death. So a Kohen can be involved in that, and a Kohen is only involved for his immediate family. Otherwise, a Kohen does not go anywhere near death.
I was confused by the language. I was thinking of someone who has no one else to mourn for them.
If someone has no one else to mourn for them. So again, in Torah law, no, a Kohen would not be involved in something like that. In modern times, because we're all impure, we've all come into contact with the dead, even Kohanim might try to, and Gabe is a Kohen, so that's yes. So Kohanim might try to maintain their symbolic status as a Kohen by not attending a funeral unless it's for an immediate family member, not walking into a cemetery either, right? So and also being careful, unless the Kohen happens to be a doctor and there's no choice, and then being careful about going into a hospital or being with patients. So if a Kohen wants to be a doctor today, it's a compromise to their Kohen status in order to do that, because even in your training as a doctor, okay. So, and this gets to the what I'm about to say gets to a very non-interfaith kind of thing. There are certain laws in Judaism where they apply to Jews, but they don't apply to non-Jews. So doctors in training, my son, I can speak for my son. So in first year medical school, you work with a corpse and you are dissecting, you are learning anatomy with a corpse in front of you. And what Howard University Medical School does is at the end of that first year of training, they will have a memorial service for the corpse that they had worked with, and conduct this very, and invite the family members who had donated their loved one's body for science in this way to this funeral for this, for the medical students to have worked with these bodies. But if that body is a Jewish body, a Kohen shouldn't be there. But if it's a non-Jewish body, it's okay. So there's a different level there of sanctity for Jewish bodies versus non-Jewish bodies. So, but if a Kohen wants to go to medical school, then they're compromising their Kohen status. Yes, Marv, you have to, let me unmute you. Just 1 second. Go ahead. I did it. You're set. Go ahead.
Okay. Exemptions for physicians, because we live with this.
Yes. Right. So I'm saying.
Because otherwise I'm in trouble.
Right. Right. So, yeah. So in other words, the exemption is this compromise that we make today in modern life. So back in the day, a Kohen would not be a doctor. Okay, so in that part, just a second, Diane. In that portion, Tazria Mitzora, the Kohen is the one who went to the person who is suffering from the skin rash, the so-called leprosy. That was okay for the Kohen to be there. The person is not dead. That's the obligation of the Kohen. The Torah doesn't know about the concept of a doctor. That doctor, even the doctor as the rabbis knew it, was a different kind of doctor than a doctor that Marvin Schneider is and my son is training to become. That kind of doctor, the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud did not know about. So, but a Kohen would not be a doctor, especially if the temple was standing in Jerusalem. The Kohen is assigned to live in Jerusalem, to work in the temple. They wouldn't do anything else. So it wouldn't even cross their mind to do that. But Kohanim today would have to weigh, well, I want to be a doctor. This is what I'm going to have to do, but I can't. So I'm going to be ritually impure. Okay, so be it. And I would absolutely encourage Kohanim to go to medical school because it's just symbolic. I also encourage Kohanim to be on our Chevra Kadisha. I would absolutely do that. So our Chevra Kadisha is our group of people, and every Jewish community has at least one. And the Washington area, as far as I know, I never knew about this growing up in Philadelphia, but the Washington area has several synagogues that have their own Chevra Kadisha. The Chevra Kadisha is Aramaic for the Holy Society, the group of men and women who take care of the preparation of the dead for the funeral. Men take care of men, women take care of women. So you're coming into contact with the dead Not at this time. Our Hever Kadisha is not working during the virus, so we are not doing that. But if this wasn't a time of virus, our Hever Kadisha would be working, and if a Kohen were to approach me and say, I want to be part of the Hever Kadisha, I would say, absolutely do it. And I would also allow that Kohen to still get up on the bima on the holidays to recite the blessing for the Kohanim and to receive the Kohen Aliyah any other time. So that's what I do. And the portion continues to talk about whether a Kohen can is not allowed to marry a divorcee, and a Kohen is not allowed to marry a widow. Right? So if we go on page 718, or Leviticus chapter 21, verse 5, the further restrictions on the Kohen. They shall not shave smooth any part of their heads, or cut the side growth of their beards, or make gashes in their flesh. Right? So regular people, regular Israelites are allowed to shave. A Kohen is not allowed to shave. They shall be holy to their God and not profane the name of their God, for they offer the Lord's gifts, the food of their God, and so must be holy. There's something about maintaining status in order to offer gifts to God. They shall not marry a woman defiled by harlotry, nor shall they marry one divorced from her husband. For they are holy to their God, and you must treat them as holy. Since they offer the food of your God, they shall be holy to you. For I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy. Okay? So, a Kohen is not allowed to marry a prostitute. A Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. This is, just a second, Diane, let me just finish this thought. This is, in the conservative movement today, will allow a Kohen to marry a divorcee, again, because it's symbolic. The status of the Kohen is symbolic today. And even if a Kohen marries a divorcee, even for the rabbis, that's okay. That marriage is still legitimate, and the children will be legitimate. But for the rabbis, the Kohen has to give up his Kohen status to marry a divorcee. In the conservative movement, that's not the case. Kohen can marry, and the rabbis also say a Kohen is not allowed to marry a convert. And so this also, in modern times, has gone by the wayside. A Kohen can marry a convert, Kohen can marry a divorcee, and still, in our shul, would still be allowed to receive the Kohen Aliyah, would still be allowed to duchen, to do the blessing on the holidays, again, because society is different today than it was back then. So Diane, let me unmute you. Go ahead.
I'm a double Kohen, but being a female, do these things apply to me?
Right, good question. So for the rabbis, there's the only thing a female Kohen would do. So in other words, a female Kohen does not work in the temple. What's described here and what's described in the previous portions in Leviticus apply to male Kohanim. Women Kohanim did not work in the temple, did not offer the sacrifices, would not visit somebody who had that leprosy, would not do any of the functional elements of what it means to be a Kohen. However, there is one side benefit to being a Kohen. So a Kohen had to live around the precincts of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and also when the temple was standing in Jerusalem, they came in shifts from different parts of the countries, different parts of the land of Israel to work at the temple 2 weeks at a time. And during that time, and whether they're in the temple or they're wherever they are in the land of Israel, their food was set aside for the Kohen. So you had to set aside from the 10th of your produce to go specifically for the Kohen to eat, because the Kohen did not have a portion of the land of Israel for themselves. The tribe of Levi did not have a land holding in the land of Israel. So Kohen, which is a subset of Levi, their job was to work at the temple. And they were supported with food by the rest of the tribes of Israel. So women Kohanim, so this applied to a woman who was married to a Kohen, or a woman Kohen herself is allowed to eat of that special food. So that's the only thing that a woman Kohen could do. And also the line of progeny, in other words, the status of being a Kohen or a Levi or an Israelite goes through the father. The status of being Jewish goes through the mother. So Diane, as you being a Kohen, your children are not Kohanim based on you, right? But Irving, may he rest in peace, was a Kohen. So, oh no, he wasn't. What was he?
He was an Israelite, yeah.
He was an Israelite. Never, okay.
It's my family that will
Okay.
go.
So, Scylla Grossberg, like you, is a Kohen, but married to an Israelite. So even though she herself, you yourself is a Kohen, your children are not Kohanim. The Kohen status goes through the man, not the woman. So Kohen for you, Diane, ends with you, but you're still in this. The other thing is there's something called Pidyon Haben, redeeming the firstborn, right? So the redemption of the firstborn happens if the firstborn is a son who was born naturally, to a mother who did not have a miscarriage beforehand, and to parents, both parents, who are neither a Kohen or a Levi. So because, Diane, you're a Kohen, and even though Irving, may rest in peace, was an Israelite, your firstborn, if your firstborn was your son, you did not have a Pidyon Haben for him because you're a Kohen. So there are two elements there where a woman's Kohen status still maintains today, in that the Pidyon Haben doesn't happen for their child, and if Truma, the special food for a Kohen, was still there today, you could still eat of that. Yes, Diane.
Okay. Now, my children were adopted. With Michael, we had an Orthodox conversion,
right,
with the mikvah, the bet din, and
right,
everything, and the bris.
Right.
And I, at the time,
yeah. So you wouldn't do a Pidyon
healthy.
Haben. You don't do a Pidyon Haben for an adopted child. It has unless the adopted child was born Jewish and was the firstborn of his Jewish parents. Right, so it's just very complicated, and you don't always know, as adopted parents, you don't always know the history, the full history of the child that you are adopted. But we did have a family in our congregation where he himself was a Kohen. He was adopted by his parents, and he himself was born Jewish and born a Kohen, and he was adopted by a Kohen father and Jewish mother. So it gets complicated with if you're a Kohen, and you're a Kohen and you're a man and you adopt children, do your children become Kohanim? And the technical answer to that is no, and that becomes very emotionally complicated. Because you would then, in other words, you would say, let's say my son is adopted. So, and let's say I was a Kohen. So he could not receive the Kohen Aliyah, even though, let's say it would be Ilan Baruch ben Yonah Shmuel HaKohen. Well, the Kohen is me, not him. And so it would be confusing to come up to receive the third Aliyah when he says HaKohen. It gets very complicated in that way. And it gets very distressing and emotionally distressing. So some of these rules of the Kohen, especially when it comes to marriage, like marrying a divorcee, marrying a convert, to apply these rules today is when the temple is not standing in Jerusalem, is really is really going above board. And even some modern Orthodox, just a second, Barry, I see your hand. Even some modern Orthodox have done away with some of these restrictions for Kohanim as well, because they recognize, we can't impose these what seems today to be arbitrary restrictions on people, because all of the restrictions essentially are symbolic today. And why should you let a symbolic restriction impede falling in love or becoming a parent? So that's the issue. So Barry, go ahead.
I had two questions or clarifications, although I think you just answered one of them.
Okay.
Because I know in the conservative, reformed, reconstructionist, renewal, the rules for Kohanim have definitely been eased, but I thought that the Orthodox still did a lot of those, like the things in cemeteries and things like that.
Yeah, right. So again, that's symbolic today. And yes, there are Kohanim. Rabbi Emor, may he rest in peace, of the rabbi of Shomrei Emunah in Kent Mill, was a Kohen. And he took his Kohen status very seriously. Well, he was a black hat Orthodox rabbi, so he would. So he would never be able to be in the shul for a funeral or at the cemetery for a funeral. He would have to be outside the building conducting the service from a microphone outside of his synagogue. So there are modern Orthodox rabbis who are Kohanim, and that's just something that if they want to be a pulpit rabbi and they are Orthodox, that's something that the congregation has to consider in hiring that rabbi. Whether that they want the rabbi present or not at a funeral, that could be a hindrance to getting a job in the Orthodox world. But when it comes to the marriage components of this, the Orthodox rabbis, because the Talmud says the marriage is still legal, they will still say it's okay for a Kohen to marry a divorcee or a convert. What would be different is whether they would then rescind the Kohen status from that person and prevent that person from coming up to the bima for the Kohen Aliyah. Now, also, there are many conservative synagogues and certainly Reform, Reconstructionist, and Renewal synagogues that do away with Kohen and Levi Aliyah. They just do 1, 2, 3. They don't do Kohen, Levi, then 3, 4, 5 anymore. Also, for the sense, since it's all symbolic anyway, why are we maintaining someone's symbolic status today? It actually goes against some social justice values that all Jews are equal today. And so we still maintain Kohen and Levi, and I am willing and have always been willing to allow. I have allowed adopted children to be called up as a Kohen or a Levi before, even though technically you're not supposed to do that, because it's just so awkward. If we're going to maintain this, well, it's just there is room to say that it's okay to do that, and so that's why it doesn't come up too often. But there is a religious school family from a few years ago whose son is adopted, and the father is a Levi, and so yes. So it's just what we do. It becomes awkward, and it becomes like, how do you deal with this, what is now essentially archaic laws, and how to maintain that today without like making people recognize, the difference, that there's something different about your child, that your child is not, because you adopted your child, whatever pain that might have gone through, you might have adopted willingly or might have adopted as after years and years of infertility. So there's anguish in that process. And so why highlight the anguish by saying that your son is not a Levi? So I see all the emotional baggage that comes with this and the emotional harm that could come with this in trying to maintain Kohen and Levi today to the fullest. And Barry, you said you had another
Yeah,
question?
the other one was really just a clarification. You said that the rules for shaving and having a beard were only for Kohanim and not for the general populace. But I thought that was a rule, and that's the whole reason for using a blade, not using a blade
Right,
versus a
right.
scissor.
So yes, so thank you for pointing that out. So yes, so I think that it's possible what was said here in the verse, they shall not shave any part of their heads, that's verse 5, or cut the side growth of their beards or make gashes in their flesh, is that to highlight, as opposed to priests in neighboring pagan cultures that are completely shaven, Jewish Israelite Kohanim let their hair grow. So I think that that's the context here, that in contrast to other societies, we're saying, and so it highlights the randomness of it, right? So in other words, in pagan societies, you want to be totally clean shaven in order to offer offerings to the gods with a small g. But in Israelite religion, you have to have hair on your head in order to offer offerings to God with a capital G. So who makes these laws, and who says that hair is bad and who says that hair is good? It's unclear, but it's clear from
That rule is for everybody, I thought. I mean, that rule is
yes, but later,
surrounding the-
yes.
Yeah.
Later in the Torah, it also says that everybody is supposed to not shave the four corners of their face, which would be right here, the sideburns, and right here, so a goatee. So the way Arnie has it, Arnie could shave in between a sideburn and just leave a goatee, and he'd be fulfilling to the letter of the law how not to shave these four corners. And of course, the ultra-Orthodox just let their beard grow and let the payas grow too. So if you saw the movie the four-part series Unorthodox, you saw how at one point in the show, Yankee cuts off his payas in order to try to be with whatever her name was in the show. So how painful an experience that was, and how much of a sacrifice that was to do that. Arnie, do you have a question?
No, I was just telling
No.
you, her name was Esty.
Esty, thank you. Yankee and Esty. Okay. All right, so we have a little bit more time. I wanted to look at a comment below the line in our edition of the Chumash about this whole thing about Kohanim. Right, so we're spending a lot of time talking about the rules and regulations and the status of Kohanim today. And I just want to read this. So this parsha lives. So I'm sorry if you don't have the Eitz Chaim in front of you. Just listen. It's on 717 below the line. This parsha lives up to the book's alternative Hebrew title, Torah Kohanim, the Priest's Manual. It focuses on special regulations of Kohanim and then on the ritual aspects of the sacred calendar. The previous parsha describes the Israelites as being set apart from other nations, called on to attain holiness through their distinctive lifestyle, right? The portion Kedoshim that came right before this said, Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You should be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy, right? So it sets us apart from other people. This parsha sets the Kohanim apart from other Israelites by means of symbolic obligations, restrictions, and abstentions in their lives. Now, that's the commentary writing this. It's symbolic today. It was not symbolic in the time of the Torah. It was not symbolic all through the temple until the year 70 when the temple was destroyed. It was real. Kohanim had a job to do, and they had to maintain these restrictions. It's only for the past 2,000 years that it's symbolic, but there are people today who are hoping for and praying for the return of the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. And there's a yeshiva in Jerusalem called Ateret Kohanim, the crown of the Kohanim, that studies specifically all these laws related to the priesthood, so that when a temple is rebuilt, they'll be ready to teach the Kohanim how to work. So that yeshiva will teach Gabe. I'm trying to see if there are any Kohanim, other Kohanim here. No other Kohanim present here. There are a couple Leviim here.
Howard Rummerman is.
Howard Rummer is a Kohen, right? So yes, if the temple's rebuilt tomorrow, then we're all living in Israel. And Howard and Gabe, you'd have a job. You wouldn't have to worry about livelihood, how you're going to support your family, and that yeshiva is going to teach you how to do your work. So, as the Israelites are to represent the God-oriented life to the nations of the world, the Kohanim are to represent a maximal level of devotion to God for their fellow Israelites, right? So they are the intermediaries between the average Israelite and God in conducting the service. And it's this sentence that I wanted to look at for the last minutes that we have. Every society needs a core of people who live by a more demanding code to set an example for others of what is possible. And so I want to leave that as a question. Is that true? Right? So there is a tradition, a Jewish tradition, that there are 36 righteous people alive in the world today for whose sake the world exists. So there's this, it's called the Lamed Vavniks, right? Because every Hebrew letter has a numerical equivalent. So Lamed is 30, Vav is 6. So there are Lamed Vavniks. So in every generation, there are 36 righteous people. And you could say, God forbid, at a funeral, this person must have been a Lamed Vavnik because of all the righteous deeds that this person has done in his or her life, behind the scenes or publicly, privately, whatever it is. So there's this concept that 36 people, it's for their sake that the world exists today. And I'm wondering, is this really necessary, right? In other words, if we know that the world exists because of 36, it kind of gives everybody else a pass. It means that we don't need to be as good as we need to be because we don't have to worry. The world's not going to be destroyed because of something we do wrong. We got the 36 people, they're doing the things that they're supposed to be done. And so I disagree with this sentence that every society needs a core of people who live by a more demanding code to set an example. No, every society needs every single person in society to live up to that code. And when any one person fails, it's the failure of society to not having looked out for that person and encourage that person to be good. So that's our job as a society, is to encourage each other, to kind of drag us along, to get us involved, to inspire us to be good people. And so I think that one possibility, one factor in the downfall of the Israelites in the rest of the Bible that we read, like from the book of Joshua through the books of Kings, it could have been related to this very sentence, the idea that the Kohanim are doing our work for us. So therefore, they're going to be holy. They have the extra restrictions. We don't have to worry about it. If we do something wrong, we'll just bring a sacrifice. But it's the Kohanim who are going to make sure that we're not going to suffer. So any thoughts or comments about that? Elizabeth, I unmuted you. Go ahead.
Okay,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I believe that it's the job of every Jew to bring light into the world, to perform mitzvot, and to go out every day, after waking up and thanking God for the day, Modani,
Right.
and just blessing whatever blessings you say in the morning, that you look to bring light into the world and goodness into the world, and that's everyone's job. I would say that because God is God and who he is, and he made the world, he's the creator of all, that's everybody's job, not just the Jew's job, but everyone's job. But I think as a Jew that we should feel that and live it.
Right. So exactly. Arnie.
I just wanted to add that you mentioned that this code is more demanding. Demanding code. And that's the part that sort of bothers me. I think we do need role models. And everybody wants to,
Yes.
have them, but I think it should be for the same code, right? That
Ah.
we all have to live up to, not one that's
Right.
higher, more demanding than all the rest of us have. It's like there's this elite group, and then we're
Right.
just the peons.
Yes.
That's
There's that element to it too, which I think is a reason why some congregations have done away with Kohen and Levi, because of that very idea. Why should some people have more than the rest of us? We're all together. It's a democracy. Judaism is a democracy, and we're all obligated to the same rules.
Rabbi,
Yes.
maybe it's not one constant group, but maybe it's an evolving group over the course of time, depending upon the world circumstances. So we could look at the first responders today as being a highly ethical group of people that we should aspire to be, that we should look up to.
So that's an interesting idea. So there's a difference between who are the heroes today, who are the people doing, who are called to service, as opposed to the Kohanim, who are just born into it, right? So now I would argue that many of the first responders would say, I'm not any better than anybody else. It's just my job. I have to do it. And some people are burnt out by it. And God forbid, there was a doctor who committed suicide in New York last week, 2 weeks ago. So, right, and you had the first responders in 9/11 in New York at the World Trade Center. They wouldn't tell you that there are extra special people, or soldiers today, anybody in the armed services. It's just they feel a call to service, and they do it. Or you would say the righteous Gentiles during the Holocaust, right? All righteous Gentiles would tell you when they were interviewed why they did this, because it's just what you're supposed to do. It's what everybody was supposed to do. So righteous Gentiles, first responders, I mean, it's just what and all of us can be that. All of us can be that. So that's the idea, I think. And so if people, so if those first responders then get an ego, I would say that that's not right. That's not part of the job, is not to have this big ego thinking that you deserve all the accolades. That's not what, and the soldiers who get the Bronze Star or the, any other kind of medals for valor or whatever, they will all tell you, I was just doing my job. So I think so there's that, how do we weigh what the Torah demands, that we need a group of people who are going to do the work and designated to do the work in the sanctuary, versus the idea that we can all aspire to holiness. So when you see other people doing a job that you yourself are not allowed to do, you might feel a sense of resentment. Who are they? It's like people in synagogues who some people have said, we don't like the duchemin, the prayer of the Kohanim on the bima, because who are they to bless me, right? And they're classic jokes. Who's that Kohen? Who's that? Why does that Kohen think that he or she has the right to bless me? And it's just not. It's not that they have the right to do so. It's a mitzvah for them to do, and it's another way for us to feel what it means to be blessed. And it's not like they have the power to bless. It's just that here's an opportunity to hear a blessing in this ancient way, to kind of relive history as we do this, and to kind of connect to what it must have been like to have been in a temple 2,000 years ago to hear the Kohen at that time do it. So it's all a matter of perspective and how we look at these things today. So as usual, I had a whole list of things potentially to look at from the portion, and that's the beauty of a session like this, that we go off on tangents, we talk about lots of things, and hopefully it was a meaningful discussion for us today. So I wish everybody to stay safe, stay healthy, and I